What was the very first psychological trick you learned that blew your mind? I have anxiety, which makes it hard to fall asleep. Things work well for me. Thinking of what I'm grateful for instead of focusing on my worries. Always redirect to being thankful, and focus on even the small things you take for granted. I'm thankful I ate breakfast today. I'm grateful that it's sunny today. Making lists in my head. Usually I use the alphabet and will tell myself come up with a cute baby name for each letter, or think of a song you like for each letter. Eventually I get time thinking so much about that and forget everything else, which helps me fall asleep. I use a hypnosis trick to relax my toes. First the left foot, then the right, then relax my arches, then my ankles, then my calves. You get the idea. Sometimes I am so wound up that by the time I get to my knees, I realize something is tense again, so I start over, but I never get to my torso before falling asleep. When I started meditation, the focus on your breath bit seemed familiar, because if you stray, you're supposed to gently refocus, and that's the same as starting the relaxation at the toes again for me. Just a gentle refocus, relaxing, zzzzz. Part of my job is compliance inspections, and I use this one all the time. Ask a question, let them answer, then just don't say anything for a couple seconds. Many people will fill that silence, often with more details about whatever you just asked. This is especially true if they were expecting some sort of the validation of their answer and you didn't give it right away. They'll feel like they need to say more because you're not satisfied with whatever they said so far. I've used this trick during a dispute with someone I did business with who didn't want to pay the full amount. They tried to justify their reasoning and I just sat there staring at them, not saying a word. This made them very uncomfortable and they started babbling and well, they lost that argument and I walked out of there with the check for what they owed me. They later told my business partner that I made them nervous, which made me laugh because I am not an intimidating person. I just know when to let other people dig their own holes. This was something I learned to do early on because I wanted to learn from everyone, whether it's facts or their perspective. This was easy with a group as everyone's just ready to jump in with something, but had to learn that just listening doesn't fly so well with one-on-one conversations. I started sharing a short personal opinions or anecdote or ask questions to keep the discussion going and so the other person doesn't feel like they are the only one talking. But major content of the discussion is usually made up of the other person's dialogue and I try to pick up as much knowledge, wisdom, or information from it so that I can become a better person from it. I'm quite deaf, so when I'm having a conversation I stare at the face intently and read lips. There is a delay in processing and sending to my brain, then making a considered response whilst making sure I've understood correctly. This happens quickly, but not as fast as a normal conversation, but it gives the impression that I'm taking in everything they said. Because I've been 70% deaf since 4 years old, I can read body language as well as lips. As a barman, even if I can't hear a word a punter is saying because of music etc., I know if someone is trying to be funny, if they are saying something sad, or if they're drunk and stating an opinion they'll assume I'll agree with just by reading their face. I know how to react in the way they are expecting, whether it's a chuckle at the correct time, a downturned mouth in sympathy, or saying mate, you're right. Everyone says you're a great listener and I find it quite funny. I struggle hard to appear normal so many times a day, but this one facet turns my disability into an ability. As a former reporter, I use this little trick regularly for 31 years. No, absolutely that wasn't our intention. Silence. Well, of course we knew there was a chance it would happen despite our intentions. Silence, with the stare. Well, we were hoping for X to happen, and one Y happened instead. We thought it was a happy coincidence for us. Silence, stare, frown. Well, of course we'd be fools if we didn't recognize that Y was maybe even likely to happen. In a blink, they've gone from, no way we wanted that to happen, to we knew it was going to happen all along. My first workplace trick that I still use regularly: people will procrastinate with their own work, but drop everything to quickly correct someone else's work. Example: Bill needs to provide a paragraph of text to go in the company's brochure. He's been dragging his feet forever and it's the last thing you're waiting on, but he keeps putting it off. Go to where his paragraph should be and write a shitty version of what he's supposed to do. Don't invest more than 10 seconds. We do widget services. We are good at it. Our services are good for your widget needs. Send it to Bill saying, "Hey, I filled in the last paragraph about widget services. Can you check and make sure it meets your criteria?" And I'll send it along to the boss for approval. You'll have Bill's polished, fully composed text in about 10 minutes. I taught teenagers in a really tough London school. A colleague taught me a brilliant trick to get a kid to calm down when they were angry. Look them calmly in the eye and say, "What do you want to happen next?" Most of the time they were so caught up in emotion they hadn't thought about the consequences of their dickery. As soon as you prod them to think about consequences, most of them would calm down straight away. Darren Brown has a trick similar to this. He's also a dab hand at disarming a potential mugger using nothing but words. Outlining his irrational behavior strategy in the Metro today, Brown recalled an incident when he was approached by a suspicious character spoiling for a fight on his way home at 3 a.m. in the morning. "I said to him, 'The wall outside my house isn't 4 feet high,' and he was suddenly confused." The idea of the psychological tactic, he added, is a bit like pulling the rug out from somebody. https://www.independent.co.uk/news/people/Darren Brown explains how reduce mugger tears using nothing words 9859017.html. Working as a waitress. If I noticed a customer was getting particularly impatient and it looked like they were going to be rude to me when I went over, when I would take the food over and before they got the chance to speak I'd say something like, "So sorry for the wait, thanks for being so lovely about it." It seemed to catch them off guard and paint them as the nice guy in my eyes, and more often than not their expression would change from pissed off to surprised. Then they'd say something like, "Oh no problem, it's okay," so they could keep being the nice guy and feel good about themselves, and I avoided chewing out. This reminds me, at my customer service job, if a caller starts bitching incessantly I feign outraged with them as though we're two buddies pissed off about the same thing. Often I remove my headset so I don't have to hear a grown man behaving like a toddler, and I interject with acknowledgement noises, and then when they shut up I just proceed with resolving the issue. They realize it would waste more time to explain to me that they're mad at me and not with me, and they piss themselves off for not being enough of a nuisance and just drop the whole act. Or sometimes they respond back with twice the outrage on their behalf and they're embarrassed like, "Okay, it's not quite that big of a deal." Absolutely this. I used to work at a call center, and we'd often have 1+ hour hold times before they got a representative. I would always say, "Thank you for calling, shitty company, and thank you so much for your patience and understanding" as part of my greeting. This alone used to quell most conflict. Coworkers who didn't do this reported way more upset people. When they would bitch, I'd always paint them as a good guy and feign empathy. "Oh wow, I'm sorry you waited an hour. I know I'd be in a bad mood, so I appreciate you being so pleasant and not taking it out on me." Worked 99% of the time. Oh yeah, little kids are so easy to manipulate. Reverse psychology. Making things a game or a challenge. "Clean up your toys." "No." "Clean up your toys." "No." "Fine, don't clean up your toys. I don't want you to." "I'm going to clean them up." "No. Please don't." I used it so much on my combative child that I was a little worried it'd mess him up. TBH. "Clean up your toys." "No." "Clean up your toys." "No." "I bet you can't clean up your toys before the timer goes off." "Yes I can." "I bet you can't." "I'm gonna clean up more than you." Dot. Isn't this the whole "I'm not a doctor but" thing? Logically, if someone says they don't know what they're talking about before speaking on a topic, you should be less likely to believe them. Instead, saying something like that makes you seem more modest, self-depreciating, or able to recognize your own shortcomings, which makes people more likely to believe you. "But I'm not a doctor so." That's similar to the bad news inoculation. Give someone really bad news first, Exaggerate the absolute hell out of it. Return shortly thereafter and say there was a miscommunication. The issue is actually underscore. They will be relieved and not as angry as if you had just given them the accurate issue first. Use this trick sparingly. Use it too often and it will damage your credibility. Minimizing. If you feel like something is a really big chore or you just can't get yourself to get up and go do something, minimize it to a small insignificant part. Instead of doing all the garden work, say you're just going to take the tools out so when you want to work you can. 90% of the time once you're up and doing the small thing, the big bad chore doesn't seem so bad now and you end up doing it. I find that when I ask someone if they'd like to be a rewards member, they're more civil with me if I say, "Would you like to be a rewards member or no?" I figure that by saying no at the end I'm insinuating that it is completely fine to say no, I don't want to be. I use this on everyone. I've had customers that I see get short with other cashiers when they ask them this. I then ask them my way whenever I'm cashiering and they're completely civil about it. I almost always get from these same people, "No thanks, not today." I guess some people view these questions as nuisance because in their mind they feel like they're asked this every time at a lot of stores. The Wally Reflector. Thanks to Dilbert Man Scott Adams, I learned the Wally Reflector at a young age. It's very simple. If someone tries to pawn their work off on you, ask them to do something for you first related to said task. 9 times out of 10 they'll leave and try to find someone else. "Hey, can you finish this report for me? I'm going on vacation and want to leave a little early to beat traffic to the airport." "Sure, I'd love to help, but could you possibly send me a quick email with a bullet point list of what needs to be in the report, just so I don't miss anything?" On second thought, it may not get you out of the work entirely, but it definitely helps delay it and puts you more in charge of when to work on it. As a controls engineer I did this a lot. They would ask me to add something to a machine, I'd respond with something like "sure, but I'll need a cross-reference for which part numbers this will affect so I can set up the recipes." 9/10 that would be a few days in coming and I could decide when I wanted to make the changes. Kill them with kindness. You lad, nothing eats away at your enemies like that. Short, sweet, simple, and confident is the trick. You could get into a massive argument for hours, fight, cuss, spit, punch, kick. Nothing will really burn them at the core quite as much as being nice to them. I believe it is a psychological trick because they usually don't expect it. They know your enemies, and it throws them into a loop and off guard. I bumped into my old boss recently. He had absolutely royally screwed me over before I quit, stabbed me square inches the back to protect his own hide. I gave him this huge smile, said, "Hey, name, good to see you." He gave a weird frown and returned, "Hi. Oh, how have you been?" "Better than ever. How about you?" "Oh, fine." He made an obvious effort to keep walking and avoid a conversation. I bumped into him again before I left the place we were at and gave him a nod, nice smile, and a 3-finger wave sort of like a salute. His face said it all. I hate that guy. Why is he happy? I did this with the CFO at my first corporate job out of college. He had no personality, no understanding of humor, never showed emotions, just all around no people skills, and was short and abrasive with people. You got the sense he thought he was better than people. Every time, and I mean every time, I saw him in the hall I put in my most chipper voice and smiled saying, "Hey Mike, how are you?" And he would just scowl. I thought it was hilarious. The Ben Franklin effect. Edit. Here's more details about it. Ask for a small favor that you can easily return later on. For example, ask to borrow $5. Return them the $5 as soon as possible. Or ask to borrow a book, and return the book in good condition with a thank you note. The person will feel good knowing they've done you a favor, and that will produce favorable feelings towards you. Also, if you return the favor well, they will see that you are responsible and that you acknowledge the niceties others do for you. Note, this effect will backfire if you fail to return the favor well, for example returning a borrowed item in horrible condition. It will also backfire if you ask for too many favors from the same person. For example, A classmate borrowed a mechanical pencil from me. At the end of the period, instead of returning it with a thank you, he left it on the desk, having snapped off the plastic clip part and taken the eraser down to a nub. It's a small thing, but it showed that he's disrespectful of others' property. Nod and agree and move the fuck on. If someone with a strong, difficult personality is demanding you do, and you don't want to but no, they'll argue. Just agree and move the fuck on. No reason to argue. Lol makes it so much more simple. Barb, you really need to use this brand of diapers. They're the best. I've had 22 kids. Me? Oh awesome, thanks for the tip. End of story. They never ask again. They just want to talk, to put their input in anything. Lol. If you want to be involved in any work environment, or feel like an insider during work, you gotta greet everyone you meet right away. If you miss them, turn around, go back, and say something like, sorry, I didn't catch your name. I'm _ If you don't have time, then take the next chance, even if it's just a hi or a wave. People will see you as assertive and approachable. It doesn't really matter if you're introverted and don't speak to them for the rest of the day or whatever. It kills most of the awkwardness associated with being social with people you may or may not know. Plus, it sets you up for healthy teamwork. So I used to write standard operating procedures for other departments. I laid the framework and then submitted them to an appropriate department manager for the details. One particular manager was always too busy, and I need their input in a timely manner because then it was my job to clean up the document formatting and submit it for higher approval. If the manager didn't do his part, the whole chain was bottlenecked and it would be me scrambling at the deadline date. So I started making intentional mistakes in the written procedure. Turns out he was reading them but not making the edits. As soon as I was wrong, he suddenly had time to edit them. A therapist told me that anger is a secondary emotion and should be treated like a traffic light. You should stop at yellow before jumping to red. Ask yourself, what was the first thing come to your mind triggered you? Is it being angered, feeling trapped, unheard, insecure, etc.? Because your first thought is what you actually feel. Your anger comes last. I'm a calm-natured person, rarely get angry. This advice helped me to identify my weaknesses and anxiety. You can apply this to any emotion, not just anger. People who feel guilty will over-explain to justify their actions. I do insurance claims. I don't need to know why you backed into a pole. I don't care. It's covered. All I need is the incident and damage description. But man, some people feel so bad about it. They won't stop going on about how the sun was in their eyes but they should have looked better and they can't believe it happened, and they have a reversing camera and sensors which were supposed to help but they didn't, and they're so angry with themselves and it's a new car and they can't believe they've done this. Alto Music Festival a few years back. I read about this somewhere and it stuck with me. So I was challenging the people I was camping with to rock paper scissors, winning a few games in a row. Another comp site buddy was calling BS on me. I said to him, pick anyone here at the festival and I'll beat them. So off we went looking for his champion. No one was interested. Is this pair of pissed funnies till he shouted, if anyone can beat my man here at rock paper scissors, you win a beer. After a few games we had somewhat of a crowd around us. He was struggling to carry all the beers. I won 19 in a row. Best of 5. Paying someone a compliment before a difficult conversation or fight, specifically, one tied to the value in or opinion of them. For example, I really appreciate the mature, level-headed way you handled yourself in our last discussion, or your patience and understanding in situations like this is something I really admire about you. It's the upgraded, more subtle version of the thank you for your understanding line you see in customer service a lot. The I and me pronouns are important, as it changes a generic compliment into an opinion or feeling you have about them. It sets a subconscious goal for the person that they will often try to live up to. It's like the subconscious goes, why yes, I am those things, let me prove that you're right, but also adds a little weight that your opinion of them will decrease if they don't. Sometimes I feel bad for using it, because it's almost too manipulative, especially if I'm lying about that opinion.